You are not financially secure. You are temporarily unpunished. Let that rattle around in your skull for a second. Most people operate under the delusion that financial stability is a fixed condition, a status bar they filled up through hard work and good choices. It's not. It's a variable. It is a moving target sitting precariously on top of global supply chains, volatile commodity pricing, and the cold logic of institutional power. You think your monthly budget is an airtight little fortress protected by your checking account balance. It's not. It is a fragile paper structure built directly in the blast radius of macroeconomic volatility. This is why the average American freezes up when a conflict zone they can't find on a map suddenly starts wrecking their disposable income. Your brain is evolutionarily wired to expect local cause and local effect. If you didn't spend money today, you think you are safe. But your money doesn't operate in a local vacuum. Your wallet is hardwired into a global machine, a chaotic, interconnected web of energy and logistics, and that machine does not care about your budgeting app, your weekend plans, or your meticulously maintained spreadsheets. On February 28, 2026, the geopolitical balance detonated. The US and Israel launched Operation Epic Fury, a large-scale combat mission that triggered a rapid escalation centered on the Strait of Hormuz. This 21-mile chokepoint is not just a geographic coordinate, it is a financial pressure valve on the American household. Once that artery is squeezed, your liquidity is extracted in real time. This is a non-consensual rewrite of your household cash flow. Disclaimer: this is strictly educational finance content, not financial or investment advice. This is a clinical breakdown of how the global system transmits pain to the individual. To understand the current bleed, we have to analyze the cognitive dissonance that set the stage for this crisis. Right before the shock, the American consumer was being lulled into a false sense of stabilization. According to the February 2026 CPI data, the gasoline index was actually in a deflationary posture, down 5.6% year over year. For the average commuter, the energy monster looked like it had been tamed. You anchored your expectations to the rearview mirror, looking at cooling inflation reports, while the global commodity markets were already pricing the windshield. Energy markets do not wait for a polite government report to update the public on the cost of living. They price disruption with zero latency. When Operation Epic Fury hit, the reaction was savage. WTI crude surged 51% in 30 days, blowing past $111.50 per barrel. This isn't just a number on a ticker. It is a violent repricing of the economy's operating system. Once crude rips at that velocity, the damage doesn't stay trapped inside a Bloomberg terminal. It moves downstream with terrifying efficiency. The refiner, the freight carrier, and the retailer all feel the heat instantly. And because they operate on thin margins, they have no choice but to pass that heat to the final link in the chain, your checking account. This is how systemic fragility works. It doesn't always break slowly. Sometimes it snaps all at once, catching the stabilized consumer completely off guard. This is where the system starts ghosting the consumer. The average person thinks, okay, oil is up, so I'll just drive less. That is a retail-level misunderstanding of the problem. Oil is the industrial blood of the economy. When energy gets expensive, freight gets expensive. This is the invisible freight tax, and it is one of the most effective wealth extraction mechanisms ever devised. Every physical good you touch, from the iPhone in your hand to the drywall in your house, has a logistics cost embedded in its price. When the Strait of Hormuz is threatened, maritime insurance premiums for tankers and cargo ships skyrocket. Ships are forced to take longer, more expensive routes around the Cape of Good Hope, adding 10 to 14 days of fuel burn to every journey. This isn't just a delay, it is a massive capital requirement shift. The economy effectively starts charging rent on motion itself. The warehouse costs more to power, the semi-truck costs more to refuel, and the local delivery van costs more to operate. Because these costs are layered and stacked quietly behind the scenes, you misdiagnose the cause. You walk into a store and think prices are randomly higher because of corporate greed. No, you are witnessing a mechanically transmitted freight squeeze. You are getting wrecked by the physics of global logistics. The milk is the same, the bread is the same, but the cost of getting it to your zip code has been fundamentally restructured. We need to kill the most persistent myth in financial media, that oil spikes are just a commuter story or a travel story. They are, at their core, a food story. Modern agriculture is effectively a process of turning fossil fuels into calories. You need diesel to run the tractors, you need natural gas to produce the nitrogen-based fertilizers, and you need electricity to power the cold chain logistics that keep food from rotting before it reaches your plate. When WTI crude stays above $111.50, it is a direct, coordinated assault on the cost of moving calories through the human system. You aren't just reacting to a change in the price of beef or produce, you are reacting to the energy density embedded inside that food. And here's the brutal part. Because it takes time for these input costs to roll through the various stages of production and distribution, the pain shows up at the grocery store with a lag. This time lag is a psychological trap. It makes the consumer believe that the shock was temporary or that they have survived it, only to be hit with a massive second wave of price hikes 3 months later. That is how retail gets caught flat-footed, not by a lack of intelligence, but by a lack of understanding of the transmission delay. The extraction doesn't stop when you leave the store. It follows you home. Your residence is the next target in the sequence of utility compression, and the setup for 2026 was already ugly. Even before the Hormuz blockade, natural gas service costs were already up 10.9% year over year. The American household was not entering this crisis from a position of strength. The energy burden was already elevated. Now the spike in global oil and LNG, liquefied natural gas, demand lands on top of an existing burden. Because the U.S. is a major exporter of LNG, a blockade in the Middle East forces international buyers to bid up the price of American-produced gas. This creates a global price equilibrium, where you are forced to compete with German or Japanese factories for the natural gas produced in your own backyard. You can choose to skip a restaurant, you can delay buying a new car, or you can cancel a vacation. But you cannot negotiate with the cost of heating your home in the winter or powering your appliances. Energy inflation attacks categories with the lowest behavioral flexibility. It is a mandatory tax on existence, and it is the purest form of systemic fragility. Now, let's discuss the power dynamic that mainstream news refuses to mention, the asymmetry of the shock. This energy crisis creates two diametrically opposed realities. In reality one, we have the institutional players. They engage in energy arbitrage. These are the hedge funds, asset managers, and global commodity traders who have the macro dashboards, the real-time satellite intelligence, and the futures access to treat volatility like inventory. When they see a choke point like Hormuz tighten, they don't panic, they reposition. They capitalize on the spread between disrupted supply and inflexible demand. They monetize the chaos. In reality two, we have you. You see the same dislocation and think, why is my debit card getting cooked at the pump? You do not have a commodity desk or a cross-asset hedging strategy. You have a paycheck, a utility bill, and a gas tank. This is the retail liquidity drain. Institutions navigate the shock as an opportunity for alpha, excess profit, while you experience it as a straight-up extraction of your household margin. Endurance is not the same thing as protection. If your financial life only works when the Strait of Hormuz is behaving, you aren't stable, you are conditionally functional. The brutal truth is this: the Strait of Hormuz is not a distant geographic headline, it is a live transmission mechanism. A 21-mile choke point on the other side of the planet functions as the final financial pressure valve on your personal life. When that valve turns, your checking account becomes the ultimate shock absorber for the failure of global maritime security. Not the Fed, not Congress, and certainly not the media, just you. The sequence is cold and mathematical. 1. The consumer is lulled by cooling data, negative 5.6% gas index. 2. The artery is hit, Operation Epic Fury. 3. The market reprices, $111.50 WTI. 4. The cost structure rolls downhill through freight and food. 5. Your household liquidity begins to bleed. Stop thinking your financial security is a permanent status. It is a variable. It is a fragile state exposed to a world that is increasingly volatile and indifferent to your meticulous budget. Ignore the mechanics of the system, and you will continue to wonder why your life feels heavier every time a drone flies 7,000 miles away. The pain is not far away. It is embedded in the price of everything you touch. That's the math. That's the mechanism. And that is the brutal calculus.